going on, everybody? It's Sean and Steve here for another episode of the Off Key Podcast. And this week, I don't know what we're going to talk about. We'll figure it out. Steve's in his normal black Steve Jobs attire once again. I'm going to turn off my air conditioner to be a professional. And what's going on, buddy? How you been?
Pretty good. In a week that had Chicago with looting and tornadoes.
And a tornado in the same day.
Yeah, I was
Hashtag 2020.
Yeah, one day. We lost power for like 2 or 3 days. It was terrible. But people had it worse, so I shouldn't complain. But yeah, it was
still live in America, so that's a win.
Yeah. But besides that, I had some pretty good homework to take home.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you nice segue. You tell me about this homework, sir.
So you had given me, and believe it or not, I've never listened to the full album, but Alkaline Trio, Maybe I'll Catch Fire. Because I've never listened to a full Alkaline Trio album before, outside of Agony and Irony, which I don't think really counts.
It counts, but
it does. But that was more of their like poppiest, I think. That was when they tried, because they were on that episode of The Hills.
Oh, were they? I had no clue.
Oh, yeah. It was like this really funny thing. It was Laguna Beach or The Hills. It was that old MTV show where they like followed Lauren Conrad around. And then the one girl was like, oh, let's go down to the recording studio. This new band, Alkaline Trio, is recording.
Oh,
do you remember
my
that?
Lord. No, I have no idea that ever happened.
Oh,
literally none.
That was like one of my first exposures to them, and it was a bad first start. But taking it back,
I'm totally gonna Google that. I'm writing it down right now.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. I had no clue that was a thing.
Maybe it was.
I don't care. I'll find it. It'll pop up, I'm sure.
But that was kind of my first exposure to them because they were recording that album. So that was kind of what I thought that they were like. And I've always known about Alkaline Trio because of the fact that like they're from Chicago and they're so popular within our circle of friends growing up. But I had never kind of listened through to a full album. And I think it's a little strange you had me start with this one. But I enjoyed it. I really did. I think it was.
Well, that's good.
I think they're kind of like the most mature. I don't know. They're like the most pop punk band ever. I don't know. Like they're very moody.
The sentence was a hot pile of garbage. What the hell? What did you just say? They're the most pop punk band ever?
Yeah. I mean, because like, I don't know. I think there's sort of like a atmosphere to their music in terms of it's just a darker tone overall.
Yeah, there's a general there's some goth tone to it. Like there's definitely times where I'm like, am I this goth on the inside?
Yeah. And
when I listen to it and I enjoy it. But so go on. Why do you think it was weird that I had you start with that album?
I don't know. It just seems like a lot of people thought that God Damn It was kind of their better entry point, or maybe some of the other ones. But people generally seem to think that maybe I'll Catch Fire is not like the most easily accessible one, because I think it's.
Go on. Sorry.
No, you can go. Tell me what your thoughts are.
I think it's from a songwriting perspective. I think you get to hear a good blend of both Dan and Matt's songwriting.
Okay.
And I think you vocally hear where they kind of started to take a little bit more shape rather than being this like extremely rough cut, which was awesome. Like, don't get me wrong. I love God Damn It. And I love From Here to Infirmary. And I love the rawness of those albums. And it's not to say that there's not raw cuts on Maybe I'll Catch Fire, but I do think that you hear kind of elements of really them kind of, I guess, forming in the songwriting as like kind of, they've always been great songwriters, but I like the fact that Dan, I feel like, got to write a little bit more on this album, or come to the forefront a little bit more on this album. So there's a little more like 50-50 give and take between the two of them. So I think that's why I like the album so much. And then I just think there's some really, really, really good songs on the album. There's really good songs on all the albums, and from their whole span. But I don't know. Maybe it's. I also feel like maybe I'll Catch Fire is kind of underrated. So maybe that's why I had you start there. But anyways,
Maybe.
please continue.
But I think kind of getting into that whole thing with Dan versus Matt, because I think what I've realized is that I like Matt's singing better, but I kind of like Dan's lyrical content better and the songs themselves a little better.
That's interesting.
So I don't know. I mean the standout track. Maybe I shouldn't say that because I'm looking at my standout tracks and none of Dan's songs are on there.
That's fine. It's whatever.
But yeah, I mean, because the Oddball Out, like Keep 'Em Coming starts off, and I was like, oh, this is gonna be kind of an upbeat, like, record. Because Keep 'Em Coming is kind of it drives a little bit more.
Yeah.
But then everything there, they get more into like just these darker themes. But I mean, my favorite tracks on that record had to be "Fuck You, Aurora," "Sleepyhead," and obviously "Radio."
Yeah, well, and "Fuck You, Aurora" is awesome. Like that song to me is, I don't know, that's in the upper echelon total of Alkaline Trio songs for me.
Yeah, and I feel like I may have heard it before, but I had never actually given it the attention probably. But it was just weird, especially because they're from McHenry.
I believe Dan and Matt are from that area, and I don't know where Derek's from. Derek came on later in the band. I don't know. I don't know all the facts about,
who came from where and everything.
Yeah. I know Dan and Matt, I think, were from the Northwest area, though, like the Northwest suburbs.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think I read somewhere that they're from McHenry, but like what I gather from "Fuck You, Aurora" is that he had a friend that moved to Aurora, and the line, "I'll never get behind the wheel of a Chrysler again." I'm guessing it's because like his friend's dad maybe got a job at a Chrysler plant and had to move away.
I have no clue. I just love the song. I've never looked up the lyrical meaning of it.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a sense like on the entire album, you could tell there's still like a young, hungry band. And it's like, it's the perfect backdrop to sort of like a dive bar, maybe.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many great, well, like, and I've said this to you before, I believe, I forget what song it is, but it's one of Dan's songs where he says, and we've talked so much, I think we filled this ashtray twice, and I'm pretty sure we've emptied every bottle in the place.
Yes, I like that line a lot.
Line,
you've got so far to go.
Yeah, like I love that line. When you talk about songwriting and writing in general, there's always this like, kind of show versus tell concept, and I feel like that's a great example of showing something happening as opposed to just saying it happened in terms of writing. But like, the ashtray twice, we've emptied every bottle in the place. I don't know. That album, I think, has a lot of interesting and very good, and it's just an album I like a lot from them that I feel like maybe doesn't get as much attention as it should, other than perhaps Radio, because obviously Radio is like pretty much considered one of their defining songs. But
yeah, and something funny about that song is for the longest time, because it's one of the only songs I really kind of know pretty well by them, but I never actually looked at the lyrics, and I always thought that the line was take my radio to bed with you, plugged in and ready to fall.
No, you are wrong, sir.
Yeah, so in my head I was thinking, take my radio to bed with you so I can like sing you to sleep, like nope. So like ready to fall asleep.
Come on, this is the Alkaline Trio.
Yeah. Instead, it's take my radio to bathe with you. And it changes the entire message of the song.
That's correct. Yes, absolutely. That's really funny that you did not realize that line was to bathe with you.
I mean, it kind of comes off. It's
so. Yeah. Side note. While I was the reason that kind of came about is somehow an article popped up in my feed of one of our social media things or whatever about when the trio did their kind of like album back and forth where they were playing 2 albums a night. Yeah. And there was a guy, I forget what website it was on, but he was kind of talking about, it was kind of reviewing that whole era. It was about, I think 5 years ago, maybe, where they played like They played God Damn It, but they also played whatever the My Shame Is True. They played like, so the newest album and the oldest album. They played those two albums in the same night, you know.
Okay.
And then they literally just kind of zeroed in. They went from album 1 to album whatever, and then album 2 to album whatever, until they got, you know, to the middle albums and played those back to back. And they were doing them in each city, like, you know, consecutively. But Matt talks about the line in Radio where he says shaking like a dog shit in razor blades, and which is like probably the most famous line ever. And it's a great line. Like, my brother heard it one time and he's like, wow, that's a great line for a song. And my brother has no interest in the Alkaline Trio whatsoever, you know, and like none. But everybody could tell, and that's an exceptional, you know, lyric. So apparently that line came from, I guess his dad was in Vietnam, and it was one of his dad's buddies from the war. Mm-hmm. And he used to say that as like, you know, like a common like old man type of thing, like that boy was shaking like a dog shit in razor blades, you know. And he just kind of threw it in there, like, and didn't think it would become one of the defining lyrics of the band, which I thought was interesting. So a little nugget of information behind that song.
It's definitely one of those lines that I think has their style written all over it.
Yeah.
Because I mean, there was other parts. What's like the one where like, I hope tarantulas come down and like lay eggs in my mouth.
I want them to let them in my mouth and down my throat to lay their eggs.
Yeah, like the imagery
from Tuck Me In.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, it is. And so like the stuff like that, where, you know, or 5-3-10-4, where he's talking about like the cattle going to the slaughterhouse. Like, there's a certain like can't think of the word for it, but it's just like that dark imagery of just like these spooky things in the night. I like they managed to slip those in. I think that sort of dog shit and razor blades line is kind of up there with it, but I don't know. It's so much better on so many levels. I don't know. It's extremely recognizable.
Yeah. And like, that's part of the thing, and especially it was funny because that article talked about, they were kind of asking the band, like, what do you think is the reason that you've become, you know, the band that you are, and like why these people have become so attached to your music, and these people are coming out, you know, for these album shows that they were doing. And Dan and Matt, it seemed in the interview, to both refer to I think it's Matt's lyrical content for the most part, you know, as opposed to necessarily the songwriting structure. But so overall, I mean, like, you know, did you enjoy the album? I know, you know, that's not necessarily your exact style or fit or whatnot, but.
No, I did. And I think it, after a couple of listens, I probably listened maybe 3 or 4 times. It definitely grew on me a bit, and I kind of understand the appeal to them. And I think I mean, it was a tight, you know, like 35 minutes.
Yeah, it's like 40 minutes long.
Yeah,
right.
But like nothing's wasted on it. And I mean, there's a couple of memorable moments. I think Sleepyhead, I really like the end to it, where it kind of breaks down and builds back up. Mm-hmm. The lyrics of Maybe I'll Catch Fire. Radio is obviously really good.
I love that song. This house is full of ears, but I can't talk to anyone. They've heard this one 1,000 times before. Mm-hmm. Like, I love those. And as far as I know, that's like a full-on dance song. You know, I don't know. I just think from a lyrical content perspective, I think you hear a lot of both of their songwriting capabilities in that album. And I think that's probably why I like it so much.
And they're spaced out perfectly, because it goes 2 Matt, 1 Dan, 2 Matt, 1 Dan. And like it just breaks it apart enough, because they do sound so different. Because sometimes you get bands where like it's very hard to decipher which singer is like singing.
Yes.
But with these guys, it's very clear, because Matt, or Dan has a bit of like, I want to say a lisp almost.
He does.
Yeah, and
like, I think when you hear him talk in interviews, you can notice it for sure.
Yeah, and it's I forgot what NFL announcer, and he was a really good NFL announcer. Like, he was really good in terms of what he said, but he got a lot of flack because he had a lisp, and it was really hard to people like to listen to for a while. And I'm not saying it's like a bad thing, But it catches you off guard a little bit. But once you listen to it, by the time I listened through like the third or fourth time, I'd gotten over that.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just like, no, this is just the way he sings, and it's a
Yeah.
bit more approachable. But it, like, the first couple of times I heard it, I was like, why does this sound so like different?
Why does it sound so lispy?
Yeah. So I think that kind of set me off a little bit on those 3 tracks, but then they kind of grew on me a little bit more. The one thing I was trying to figure out was what in 5-3-10-4, what 5-3 eyes means.
I actually looked that up not too long ago, and I don't even remember. There was some interesting stuff about it, but if you have information on it,
So
please go for it.
I was like really trying to figure out what the hell it meant. And I had seen like in a couple message boards, and one guy said he had interviewed Matt Ski, but this was from like 2003. And he asked what it meant. And he said when he was a bike messenger, he had a friend named Virgil, that they were a bike messenger, but they had these radios where they would talk to each other. And they would meet up to go like eat lunch or smoke pot or whatever. And his code name on the radio was 5-3. And then so when he'd be like, hey man, this is 5-3, like you want to go meet up, he would say 5-3-10-4, like 10-4, good buddy.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that's true. I had also seen people say it's because he's talking about being back in high school and he's 5'3", and that was like the height he was.
Well, and like I know the song sounds like it's kind of about bullying.
Yeah, and being small. And
so maybe that is the case. But yeah. That song is, I don't know. I don't know if it's necessarily my least favorite on the album, but it's definitely, that song always did have me curious, though, behind the meaning. I feel like it was always kind of shrouded in mystery.
Yeah, the lyrics are pretty cryptic. And I know it's like, this is an important album to you. I know the Trios played a big part in your life. I mean, when did you first hear this? This was...
Oh, Maybe I'll Catch Fire. I probably bought around, I would say, probably 2003. Pretty much like once I bought From Here to Infirmary, which I think I bought at Music Warehouse in Downers Grove, or Warehouse Music. I think it was it Music Warehouse or Warehouse Music? I think it was Music Warehouse. But I think once I bought it and heard From Here to Infirmary with like Stupid Kid on it and all that stuff, I was pretty much hooked. So shortly after that, I think I pretty much jumped into everything that was out and to that point. And then shortly after that, they released Goodbye Morning, which I feel like is a fairly underrated album.
Okay. Well, I mean, because I know at one point they kind of, and I think Agony and Irony, because I remember you played that for us when we went on the road trip, and I think that's why I had it, because I had like a burnt copy in my car.
Oh.
But that one was a bit more, I think, mainstream. That was made for more like straight radio play. But
yeah, probably. Their biggest success was Time to Waste. I feel like that got the most radio play for them ever. That and Stupid Kid were probably their biggest like radio hits.
Gotcha. So,
but
I might dive in more. But
I'm glad you enjoyed it. If you're gonna dive in more, then I would say like go to Goddammit and hear like the really like raw kind of chaos of that album, and I think you'll still hear the songwriting and lyrical content. It's one thing I will say is just like I think Matt and Dan both have a very unique way of describing things at times. It's not always perfect, but I think there's always a couple of songs on every album where you hear lines and you're like, damn, that's really good. Like, yeah, that's awesome.
But and then sometimes it deserves that re-listen because you need to give it that second, like, what did he mean there? You kind of start digging around, like it's sort of like cryptic messages. But either way, I enjoyed it. Thank you for sharing.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. So now that we gotten through that, you gave me, what did you give me? You gave me, like I said last week, all I think about when I hear Typhoon is the gay hairdresser from Parks and Recreation. Damn you, Typhoon.
Typhoon. That's far from it.
So, yes, Typhoon the band, or one man. It's one man, correct? Or
no,
one
it's
individual.
It's 11 people.
It's 11 people, but it seems very much to me that it is controlled by one person.
So yes, and Kyle Morton is the kind of the mastermind. He's the singer and like
We'll
main
call him the
guitarist.
composer.
Well, and that's the thing. So the thing to mention is when I saw them live once, and I wish I've gotten to see them live again, because even when Megan came with me, Megan doesn't really like going to shows, and it was at the Metro. But there's 11 of them on stage, and he kind of like composes at the same time where he's directing them in terms of when to sing their parts. Because it's like it's a mini orchestra on stage, and it just sounds huge. And it sounds
That's
like
awesome.
you're seeing like a symphony of a rock band symphony in front of you. And even Megan walked away, because especially she hates seeing shows at the Metro because it's like she's so short and like stuffed in there. She loved it. Like we even talked
That's
about
awesome.
it. Yeah.
That's
So
awesome.
it was a very unique experience.
Why didn't you invite me to that show?
I probably did, and you're probably like, nah, that's dumb.
That's bullshit. Because I would have remembered hearing about a band called Typhoon, but I've never heard of them. So how did you hear about these people?
Again, Sputnik Music, man.
Okay.
Best known little internet corner to find music for people.
Well, okay. Shout out number 2 to Sputnik Music. Maybe we should just get on board with them and they can start promoting our podcast.
There we go.
This album was very intriguing in a lot of ways. So this album was very intriguing to me. From a musical standpoint, I feel like the guitar and the tone of the guitar kind of carries this album. You can hear it, I feel like, throughout most of the songs. I definitely enjoyed that there's elements of brass and trumpet that come in on multiple tracks. And I think it really adds a really strong layer to some of the songs. I also think that there are vocal melodies brought in by the female vocalists, whoever is part of the band or whoever's in the band.
Yeah.
That were awesome. Was that a ghost? What the hell was that?
Train.
It's the train. Hello, train. So I thought the vocal melodies brought in on some of the tracks were fantastic. And I also thought the songwriting, the lyrical content was very interesting. So what I have written down is there's, like, I think it's like the first or second song kind of reminds me of that Radical Face song. I can't remember the name.
Home.
Welcome Home.
Yeah.
There's definitely that kind of vibe to it in terms of pace and style. I also found it interesting how he chops up some of the songs in terms of there's sometimes these like one of the songs specifically, I want to say it might be the second track on the album, which is technically the first because there's like a prelude on the album. Maybe it's the second or third song. It has this kind of like it starts off and then all of a sudden he like cuts it and there's like a 2-second delay and then it comes back and it's like there's these rhythmic chop ups that kind of freeze you for a second as you're listening, which I thought was really interesting. But the big thing, like I said, that stood out to me that I thoroughly enjoyed was the brass and the vocal melodies from the female vocalist coming in over him or on the bridge or as the song develops and then popping in there and like really kind of bringing parts of the songs home. I really liked with the vocal melodies, I think kind of more what I'm talking about. There's the lake, which I thought was awesome. There's like kind of a digital build at the back end of that song or the second half of it where it gets really kind of profound. And then I apologize for the delay here. I'm trying to remember the name of the track and I didn't write it down in my walk because I'm unprofessional. This is, I mean, just unacceptable. But yeah, in regards to what I said, what did you think? Like, you know, do you ever reply to what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think the thing that actually hooked me into that album, oddly enough, was the review that Sputnik Music had. And I just remember it was very unique, and it was talking about this town in, like, I don't know, Montana somewhere where it's a population where I think the town itself is just an actual post office. Um, I don't know, whatever it was unique enough to get me to go look at it and talk about this band of 11 or 12 people or whatever it is. And then what I was drawn to was the fact that it was this sort of orchestration and it was this big feel, and the songs do blend together and they're more of movements as opposed to like your traditional songs. Because there would be like, you would check the track listing and all of a sudden you're on the next song, but you don't know when that started.
It is interesting that you said that they blend together, because there were times I'd say I listened to the album about 2.5 times.
Okay.
And there were times I felt it was really easy, to notice the track differentiating.
Mm-hmm.
And there were times I felt that it was really hard. It was a very interesting album because it was very hard for me to decide if like I really, really loved it or if it was just kind of like above average.
It took me a couple listens.
But like upon first listen, I was like, wow, this is really different. I really enjoyed it. And then kind of the second listen, I was like, is it really that different? Do I really enjoy it? And then I listened to it for real. And then I listened to it again tonight, like on my walk or whatever. And I was listening again. And I was kind of jumping through tracks, and I was like, no, I think I do really like it. And I was just kind of having this like internal argument of like, how much do I like this? Do I like it a lot? Do I not like it a lot? So for me, the kind of notable tracks off of it were Artificial Light, which is the second track, Young Fathers, and 2, 3, and 4 I thought were all really interesting. Actually, 2, 3, 4, and 5 I thought really bring you in there. And then Hunger and Thirst I thought was really interesting too. I definitely think the whole album is worth a listen. So if you are listening to our podcast, which we greatly appreciate, and we hope you're enjoying it, and I definitely think this is an album that people should check out, especially if you're a fan of indie rock in any way. I think there's a lot to be intrigued by on this album, without a doubt. And like I said, the favorite thing for me was the vocal melodies that came in from the female vocalists on this album. I thought were really, really added to the music, along with the brass and the horns. So that was it for me as far as, and his lyrical content is interesting. I think there's a lot of like narrative story. The one lyric that really stuck out for me was when he's like, I am not a criminal, but I'm like a guilty party or whatever he says. I forget.
When they kind of do that.
Track it's on.
I think that's Prosthetic Love. Or actually, I think it's Dreams of Cannibalism.
Okay.
But I know what part you're talking about. And they have sort of like
it's the intro. It's the first verse. It's just like, I am not a criminal. It's the very first verse.
And then I think they bring that in again.
Yeah, they bring it in later. Yes.
Where
yes,
like it's like a choir of people singing. And that's the other thing, is when they get those parts. And I can't remember which song it is, but it's the one where it just that that it goes and it just keeps building. I'm not gonna do it. But when they did that live, and he was just like pointing at each person as they started, and there's 11 people just like filling, and everyone in the audience was singing along with it. It was awesome. And so I mean, they have that sort of that fullness that you can only get by having so many instruments on stage and having them all blend and complement each other, I think, to the right parts. It's funny that you mentioned The Lake is like one of your favorite songs, because one of the big storylines kind of behind that album is there's a lot of like existentialism, like fear of death, like thoughts of death, like on that album. And one of the things is that when he was younger, Kyle Morton had a real bad case of Lyme disease, and that's what The Lake is about. It's about him going to a lake where he got bit by a tick, and then he got real bad Lyme disease to the point where he was having like multiple organ failures, and it basically like ruined his childhood. So that part where he was talking about like, I was sick in bed, I wanted her, but she wanted you. Like, it's talking about how he was basically spending his entire childhood sick while his best friend was like dating a girl that he was in love with, kind of thing. So there's like a lot
That's
of these.
so sad.
It is.
That is terribly, horrifically sad.
Yeah, but it's so there's a lot of these things, but there's also like a hope, like an optimism to it.
No, there's definitely a lot of uplifting tone to the album, for sure,
Yeah,
without a doubt. Um, and I appreciated that about the album a lot.
yeah, and the I mean, if you were ever interested in continuing the Typhoon storyline, the follow-up album that they put out like 5 or 6 years after, because it takes a lot to put that much together, was
For sure.
the next album was called Offerings, and I was thinking it was going to be much more the same style, but it was a much darker tone, and it is a concept album, and it is narratively from the perspective of a man who has like Alzheimer's or something, and he's gradually losing his memory. And lyrically, it's driven from this point, and it was inspired by the fact that he was like the lead singer Kyle Morton was having a hard time remembering things lately in this day and age of like digital consumption and like overwhelming. So he was just like, I wanted to put myself in the driver's seat of somebody who's like losing their memory to the point where he can't recognize the people around him. And like by the time it is a big pill to swallow.
Okay, that's a good disclaimer
The
for people that are interested in getting into the album.
if you read along to every line and you put in the time and effort to understand all of the references that are made in it, I cried at the end of the album.
Dude, sometimes there's songs and music that can make you do that. I've had songs that make me cry for sure.
But like
I'm not afraid
oh
to
no
admit
no
that.
no, but it was just it was a reminder of like how easily like you can lose like everything around you. But it's called Offerings, and I sent him an email. I sent Kyle Morton an email. I was just like, this is the most important album I've listened to this year. Like,
When did
blah blah
you
blah.
send him this?
I sent it like, I don't know, January of whatever, 2 years ago. Like
Okay.
6 or 7
That would
months
be
later.
20 minus 2 is 2018.
Yeah. 6 or 7 months later, I get an email back from him. He's like, sorry, we have like a lot of emails that come through. But he just wrote me this real kind, like, thank you.
Get the fuck out of here, dude.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So what did he say? I'm sorry. That's really cool.
No, it just basically it was just like, thank you for your kind words. Cause I think it probably everyone was expecting that sort of like White Lighter was a very, it was more of in the indie rock vein of, I don't want to say like Arcade Fire, but it was like more upbeat, like,
yeah, it had that tone to it. I can see that. I can see what you're saying.
Yeah, like a Edward Sharpe Magnetic Zeros, kind of like big band, lots of instruments. This next album really took you down like a dark hole. I love it.
Sweet.
But but it's not for everybody. But I think
Steve loves his sad music, folks. If you've got sad, depressing, like wretched, like cry in the corner in the dark by yourself albums for Steve to listen to, please, for the love of God, send him all of those albums. He wants nothing. His life is so good that he needs these sad, terrible, depressing records to level him off.
Why do you think I wear black every day? That's what I do.
For real.
Just shave my head and go sit in the corner. But no, if you ever want to like feel down, but there's an uplifting part at the end. It's like a nice epilogue. That's all I'll say about the album. I hope it sounds like you liked it to a degree.
No, I did. I did thoroughly enjoy it. I don't feel like I got enough time to really dissect it efficiently. I will say this. I need to be better. I need to be better at dissecting the homework that you give me. I am failing you, and I apologize.
It's okay. Because
No,
like
it's not okay, Steve. Okay, that's shitty production value, and it's unacceptable.
it's part of our dynamic. So,
Yeah, you care, and I don't.
perfect. All
You
right.
got to find a balance. All right, so I did enjoy the album. I encourage people to go listen to White Lighter because I definitely think it is a very intriguing album, especially if you are of the kind of indie rock persuasion and just acoustic persuasion. I think there's a lot of acoustic on there that people will very much enjoy. You're something new. To preface this, Steve had told me that he is very excited to talk about his something new this week. I have no idea what the hell that is. So, Steve, the floor is yours.
Okay. So this is something the band has been out for like 18 years. So I don't know if it counts as new, but their album is new. The band is called Protest the Hero. And
I've heard of them.
Okay. So the album was called Palimpsest. I think I'm pronouncing that right. The definition,
Could you use it in a sentence, please? Could I have the country of origin?
Yes. The definition is a manuscript or piece of writing material on which the original writing has been effaced to make room for later writing, but of which traces remain. So the reason I was so excited about this, and I think you'll be excited about it too, is that, first of all, Protest the Hero is a Canadian progressive metal band in the same vein as like vocally and sonically, I feel like they kind of reminded me of Dragon Force in terms of. So Rhodey Walker, the lead singer, he's just got this like really great range. I think a real pure sound to his voice. And actually, right before they were going to record this album, he had real bad vocal cord damage, and he had to get like throat surgery and everything. So the fact that he came back and produced it
sounds awful.
Yeah. But
he produced the album too?
No, he didn't produce it.
You said that, meaning he. I'm going to get a beer. That's right, people. Going to get a beer. So anyway.
Speaking of professionals.
It's our show, Steve. We can do whatever we want.
Okay.
Steve. All right?
Okay. And we're back.
This will be our top selling episode strictly because of that move.
Probably.
Exactly.
So okay. So before I was
I don't know why you let that throw you off so much.
I don't know.
That's unprofessionalism. A true professional would have just rode that wave.
Well, I don't know if we were stopping that. Either way.
No. I would have said something. I would have said there's an issue.
Okay. Cool. So
we'll fix it in post.
Yeah, it's always. All right. So fuck. Okay. So the reason I was so excited about this album is that, and I think you would be excited about it, is because what it does is it basically takes a lot of like American history, and granted they are a Canadian band, but they take a lot of American history and like find like these sort of deep, like dark sort of like sides to it. But each song is unique to a specific kind of moment, like a historical moment. So like the first track on it is called The Migrant Mother, and it's written from the perspective of Florence Owens Thompson, who was the migrant mother. It's like that famous picture of that woman during the Great Depression, during the Dust Bowl.
I know exactly what photo. I know exactly what photo you're talking about.
The two kids are on her shoulder.
Yep.
So it's sort of like from her perspective of her traveling west.
That's
like,
really interesting because that photo is just the emotional depiction you get from looking at that photo, which if you've never seen it, I will have it up here on the YouTube channel, but it is it's very hard hitting. And you can feel it right away in the moment of just seeing that photo.
Yeah, and it's like a 4-minute track, and first of all, like the lead singer, his vocals, I love. I think the musical ability of that band. It's super tight. It's very
Mm-hmm.
technical. You know, you get that from a lot of metal bands, but it just sounds clean.
Uh-huh.
So you have these like this real good narrative that they're telling alongside what I feel is very accessible. It's not like a lot of growling, screaming,
Yeah.
metal in that sort of way. So it's very accessible, at least
Would
in
you
that.
would you say that because you said they are Canadian, and when I think Canadian and I think of progressive rock or prog metal, it's so hard to not think about Rush. Uh, do you feel that Rush is within them in a very heavy way?
Uh, I mean, maybe in some weird like step cousin sort of similarity, where like
So not really.
I wouldn't say I also don't know Rush too well, so maybe that's my homework for next.
Vocally, you said you really enjoy the vocals. If you had to compare him vocally to somebody like who, or like another band, perhaps, what are you hearing from them vocally?
Well, when I say the Dragon Force thing, I think that's probably the closest thing. And I know we were talking about Moontooth before. I wouldn't say it's his vocals are much more unique, I think. But I thought Dragon Force, like I
Okay,
thought
so we're
Dragon
getting
Force,
that very like high metal, almost like fantasy
yes,
metal vocals. Okay,
yes, but not the same
gotcha.
themes. It's not
Uh
like
huh.
we're going on a quest and we're gonna kill the
Yeah.
dragon.
Yes.
Um,
As my niece once sang while I was playing guitar, she sang, "They've all got swords that glow on the castle," and it was awesome. It
like
was
Jet.
hilarious. She made that song up when she was like 5. I was like playing some like kind of like metal riff on my guitar, and she was like, "They've all got swords that glow on the castle." It was great.
Like
So funny.
medieval Jedi. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but
It was awesome.
so each track though on the album discusses sort of like this unique American history. So I'm just gonna do a quick rundown because I think a lot of them are just really interesting. So the first track was
Okay.
the Migrant Mother, Florence Owens Thompson. The second track is The Canary, and it talks about Amelia Earhart and
Okay.
basically how back then women were like they were only noted they were only notable when they failed. And so the fact that like she
Uh huh.
didn't like that was kind of what she's remembered for is like not making it across the
Yes,
ocean.
that she disappeared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And um the next track is it's called From the Sky, and it talks about the Hindenburg crash and
Okay.
how it really actually wasn't that like unique of a voyage. Like there's nothing special about like it wasn't like the Titanic, like the maiden voyage of the Hindenburg, but it talks about the actual Nazi affiliation and like the swastika that
Mm-hmm.
was actually on the back of the Hindenburg and that nobody actually
Mm-hmm.
recognizes it. Um, but I didn't know that about the Hindenburg accident, but the next track on it is like they have 3 or 4 piano instrumentations throughout that kind of break up the chaotic metal insanity that goes on through like the album. So there's Harborside, which is kind of
Chaotic metal insanity. Okay.
yeah. um but the
Oh, did
next
you
track
freeze? Uh,
I didn't, but and
no,
then it
you're
goes
good.
the next track is kind of it's called Harborside, and it goes hand in hand with the next track, All Hands. And it talks about I never had heard of this before, but it sounds horrific. But it's the Great Molasses Flood in Boston. All right, technical difficulties. So,
We apologize to our 42 listeners.
so, um, so the next track on there, it's called Harborside, All Hands. And it talks about, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's the Great Molasses Flood of Boston in 1915 or 1919, I think was the year. So anyway, there was this explosion in Boston apparently where 2.3 million tons or gallons of molasses exploded and flooded the streets and went at 35 miles per hour down the streets.
Holy cow.
Yeah. And it killed like 35 people, and like it describes this horrific disaster of people just getting caught in molasses and like dying. Um, but it was just like this really intense thing that I never heard of and never gets talked about.
Remember when I said that Steve likes really sad, depressing albums?
It's,
Now he's talking about a song where 35 people were killed by molasses flooding the streets.
but I think what's interesting about this album is that I'm learning things about history that I didn't learn in school. Like I'd never heard of this shit. Like some
No,
of
I
it.
agree.
Like
I agree.
yeah.
I agree. No, it's very interesting. I just think it's funny that we talked about you loving sad albums, and now you're talking about an album that
Yeah, it's
is
certainly
talking about these things.
yeah. None of this album is really like light content. I mean, just bullet pointing the next couple ones. It was like, they talk about the fireside chats and how like FDR basically got like us into the war to get us out of the depression. There's 2
Oh, for
tracks.
sure. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
if you've studied history in any way, somewhat, I guess, somewhat specifically, it's pretty commonly known if you've studied World War II history that FDR wanted to get us into that war.
yeah, and I think I don't know where we would be without it. Unfortunately, I hate to say it, but
we wouldn't be in where we are now. That's for sure.
yeah, but yeah. I mean, so it's just a lot of like really cool historical themes. It talks about mobsters, it talks about Dillinger, it talks about Babyface Nelson, it talks about Native American genocide. The album ends.
Don't laugh when you say the phrase Native American genocide, Steve.
I'm not laughing. It's just me being uncomfortable all the time.
Steve's an asshole, everybody.
But,
lack of sensitivity.
No sensitivity whatsoever. Yeah, but I thought it was just such a really unique album. The artwork on the front is really cool. It's like a bull kind of plowing through. It's I think the end of the album, it ends with talking about the completion of the American railroad system. And it's basically like they're Canadian. They're not trying to completely like say America is terrible. It's just a look at history from a different vantage. And the idea of like the last track of America made this thing. It was the first one to create this railroad system as something great and something really, important through history. And so it's like they try and leave saying like we could still be this like great nation that makes great things. So I got really excited about it. I was like diving into all these lyrics and like historical backgrounds. And
well, that's awesome, dude, because that's what this show is about. So that's great that you were that got that into it. Like that's I hope people that are listening to the show are having those same moments and experiences of like, finding whether it's their own albums or stuff that we listen to. But I love that, like, that's what this is about.
Yeah. So Protest the Hero, Palimpsest. That's kind of all I got to say.
How do you spell the name of the album?
Palimpsest. Can you use it in a sentence?
Yes. With country of origin, please. So that is your new. My new thing this week, which like has kind of been on my radar for a while, was the Fiona Apple album.
Okay, good. I want to hear somebody's thoughts on this.
And did you listen to it?
I've listened to parts of it, and I know it's gotten really good reviews. I want to hear your thoughts on it.
Okay. So, people have been putting this album as like to an unbelievably high level. I don't think that's out of. I don't necessarily think it's outrageous to say that. I think from a female perspective, and me trying to put myself in the shoes or the place of a woman, I can definitely see why like women would love this album. And it's not to say that I didn't enjoy it, because I did enjoy it. I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. When I think of Fiona Apple, I think most people think of Fiona Apple and they think of Criminal. Um, and that song is amazing. You remember that
Oh, I
song?
thought she was a criminal. I thought like she did
No,
time something. No, actually, I don't know
no.
much about
The
Fiona
album
Apple.
or the song Criminal, I believe it. So, like, she wrote that. As far as I know, I don't know much about her either, but I know that she's considered this wildly fantastic songwriter. But if you go back and watch the video, the video is very vulnerable, like especially for the time that it came out at, and she was young. Like, she really puts herself out there in the video and the song, and you definitely like. I can understand like how easy it is to latch on to that. But I think it's a really great song. And this album, I've never really listened to any Fiona Apple album ever in my life. Like, I'm not going to pretend like I have. I'm not going to pretend like I know a bunch of her songs. I've heard her songs before, but Criminal is the one I know, by far the most. But this album I thought was really interesting. I got about 2 listens into it, in the past like 48 hours. It's extremely percussive. So the album,
Yeah.
I felt like, does not play a lot to other instruments other than like percussion, drums, bongos, any sort of hand instruments. I feel like it plays a lot to that and her vocal capabilities and her very interesting songwriting and narrative, like storytelling capabilities.
Mhm.
I thought my favorite tracks on the album were the first track, which I apologize, I did not write the name down of. And then there's the title track on the album, which, by the way, the name of the album is Fetch the Bolt Cutters. But I think one of my biggest takeaways from the album was it's very percussive and at times jazzy. And sometimes it has elements of almost like spoken word, like being in a coffee shop. But then she breaks out in
Yeah.
these she kind of breaks out into these vocal parts where you really start to see, or not see, but you start to really, the song comes to take shape more and come together. But I did enjoy the album. It's not necessarily my favorite thing that I've listened to, but the album has been getting so much praise and rave reviews that I definitely I wanted to hear what was going on
Hmm.
and listen to it. And so for me, the first song on the track, or the first song on the album, is called I Want You to Love Me. That was probably my favorite song on the album. It's this very piano driven song, and she's got great vocals on it. And I just think that to me, from a musical perspective, was the best song on the album. And then I really enjoyed track 8, which is called Ladies. I thought that song was great. I think it's about kind of empowering women to be themselves and not be afraid of who they are, and you know um, just being who they are, and not being afraid of that. To repeat myself like an idiot, but I really think that's what that song is about. Like, I was hearing it again tonight, and I was like, man, this is really interesting, and I think it's a really good song. But overall, and Cosmonauts, which is track 10. Those were like my 3 tracks, 1, 8, and 10, that I thought were, to me, kind of what I thought were the most, maybe not necessarily approachable, but definitely the most enjoyable tracks for me on the album. And I did enjoy other songs on it, but I definitely thought it was something very different for me to listen to. Musically and from a songwriting perspective, and that's kind of what this whole thing is about. So that was enjoyable to me, in the sense of, like, after I got done with it, I was like, this album might not exactly be my cup of tea, but I enjoyed it enough to be able to talk about it, and there's a lot of things I found interesting on it. And I definitely think you see her lack of we had talked about last week with like the Smith Street Band, and just kind of the lack of fear in songwriting.
Yes.
I don't think Fiona Apple I don't think she's ever had any fear in putting herself out there and as a songwriter. And as we talked about last week, that's so hard to do and to not be afraid of, that it's so hard to not respect. Like when you hear it on an album and the stuff they sing about and the way that the album's written or comes through, it's like, it's crazy. It's so hard to do that. I can't stress that enough to the people listening to the show. If you ever write music, like, it is so hard to be that out there and vulnerable and just really like, I don't give a shit. This is me. This is who I am. And it's so incredibly difficult. And
there's been stuff I've written in like
so much. It takes so much to do that.
Yeah. No, there's stuff like I've written in journals before that I'm like afraid to put on paper because I'm afraid someone might like dig it out and read it. I can't imagine what you would have to go through to be able to like have the confidence to not only write that shit down, but then to actually say it and then send it to like a million people
and just sing it like profoundly, like with this level of confidence.
Yeah, every just, like night after night. So I have not made it fully through that album. I've given it, I think, 3 listens, and I've had the same intrigue, I think, that drew you into it, and that's why I was like very curious to see if you had like gotten through it. And each time I feel like I'm taking like deeper steps, like I'm in a pool and I'm like starting in the shallow end.
And you can't swim and you're just slowly inching your way in.
And then I'll lose, I can't touch the bottom and I'll like run back to the shallow end and start over. And actually, I tried it again recently and I think I got to Ladies. And actually I did enjoy Ladies. I thought Ladies was good. I think
it's really good. I think it's really good.
Yeah. And I think the first time I tried listening to it, I think it was that first track, that piano, that open.
It's fantastic. That piano melody in the first song is awesome.
It sounds like, and I'm not trying to say this in like a demeaning way, but like, you know, you have that like free-spirited, like 45-year-old lady who's got like maybe a couple cats and like a nice garden. Like she's like, hey, come on inside. And she's like, I'll play you a song. Like, that's what I feel like you're kind of stepping into. And it sounds terrible, but I mean it in like the nicest way. Like those people are they're just genuine. Like, you know what they're going to say is going to be true and like not sugar-coated. Mm-hmm. And like they've been through some stuff, like, you know, maybe heartache or breakups or whatever. But the thing that always got me, I think it was in the first track when she starts doing that sort of the vocal choking noises
at the end,
and I was like, what is this? What are you doing?
No, I totally agree. It totally takes you out of the track.
It did,
without a doubt.
Every time.
It really frustrated me.
And I know there's people out there who are like, no, that's art, man.
Well, and that's fine to think that. And I don't blame you. There's a lack of fear. Like I said, there's a lack of fear in being like, and obviously her success as an artist gives her the freedom and ability to pretty much do that.
Yeah.
I feel like, but at the same time, like, I basically decided when I heard that, I was like, I'm considering the start of that whole vocal thing to be the end of the track. For me, that's what it is.
Okay.
Like, I was just like, I'm going to separate that from the rest of the track, because I was really shocked. Like, I put the album on and I heard it, that first song. And again, it's, what is it called? I Want You to Love Me. So I put it on and I was very excited because I heard that piano arrangement come out and her come in. And I was like, man, this is tight. This is sweet. I really like this. And the whole song is going and I'm really enjoying it. And then, like you said, that vocal kind of sporadic chaos, like, comes in at the end. And I was just like, I could have done without that. Yeah. And then I kind of like rewinded. Like, I was like, I'm going to listen to this one more time to make sure that I could have done without that. And then I was like, yes, I definitely could have done without that. So I just decided like I'm separating that part of the track from the rest of it. And I think there's so much good stuff in, you know, the 99.5% of that song.
But I think you're very right in the percussive aspects to it.
It's super percussive. It was crazy.
It was like shit that she like, oh, here's a bowl of keys and here's like some soda cans and I'm gonna just like start banging on some stuff.
Here's a bowl of keys.
I don't know, but it was.
I think you nailed it from a descriptive perspective. That was great.
Yeah,
it is. It's extremely percussive. That was the one thing I noticed. Like every track is filled with this almost this like jazz percussion that kind of a lot of the times kind of drives the track initially, and then you kind of go into other places from there.
Yeah, and it's not your traditional rhythms either. It's not just like your standard 4/4 time. Like it's
not at all. And that's why I wrote down like the jazz statement. Like there's and the spoken word stuff. Like it very much had that vibe. There's like it's almost has a coffee house aspect to it.
Yeah.
Way better than coffee house.
Yes. Yeah, way better than the
than Joe Schmo at the corner doing coffee house spoken word.
Yeah. No, it's slam poetry. That's what I was trying to think of.
Yeah.
But no, I'd like to get through the full thing, and I will at some point. But yes, I think there's a couple things that, like I said, I've dipped my toes in, and every time I get a little deeper and then just run out because it's just like, this is weird.
I'm not in the right space for this.
Yeah, but eventually I will get through it, and it's growing on me a little bit each time, and I don't know much about her like history, but I think it's one of those important albums that probably you should listen to if it's getting that high regard. Usually those albums, like, they may not hit you right away, but if enough people, I'm not saying you should be swayed by the masses, but if there's enough people who are like, no, this is good.
Yeah.
And there's been albums before where I've been like, I don't like this. And then that 5th or 6th or 100th time you listen to it.
I don't think you need 100 listens for this.
No, if it's 100 times, then they're forcing something. But
no, but yes, I definitely think.
But there's been albums that, like, 15, 20 years ago, like, I hated because I was younger or whatever, and I listen to them now, and I'm like, why didn't I listen to this and go see this band when they were still together? So
it's because you're young and stupid. That's all of us.
Yeah,
that's what we, that's life, dude. That's how it works. But yeah, I enjoyed it. It's not exactly my cup of tea. But like I said, man, from a songwriting perspective, she's extremely vulnerable. She's not afraid. I feel like from what I've known about her music, she's always been that way. And I definitely think this album is, going to continue to be talked about because from what I understand, I don't think she puts out albums very often.
No.
So I think when she does, it's something that's like, obviously has a lot of emotion and personal attachment to it. It's not just like, oh, this is the next step in the process. You know what I mean?
It's a bit more of an event when you have that much time between things.
Yeah. So, but I encourage everybody to go listen to it that, isn't already a fan of hers. If you're a fan of a very good vocalist that has a lot of musical talent and is not afraid of being a vulnerable songwriter, I definitely think it's something you should go seek out and listen to a couple of tracks and see if they catch your attention. And if not, whatever, no big deal. You tried and it's whatever. What else you got for me, man?
All right, so my something old this week. I don't even remember what spawned it, but I had this like this lightning bolt thought. Moby. I wanted to listen to Moby. I just had this urge to listen to Moby. So his album Play, which I've never just you've actually probably heard every single track on there because of a commercial or a
Uh,
film or a.
I believe I accidentally stole that album from my brother, so I'm pretty sure I know most of the tracks off of it, and it's really good.
It is.
It's
And
fantastic.
well, because the only one I thought I really knew was like Body Rock and
Yeah.
Porcelain.
No, it's really good.
Yeah. And there's a, it's got an interesting history to it. So just like a real quick background is that Moby had put out Animal Rights like before that. And so
Okay.
he was like kind of, a mid-level fame, I think, DJ back in the 90s. And then he wanted to put out an album that was based on his like punk and metal and hardcore influences. So he put out this album called Animal Rights, which I didn't listen to, but apparently did both commercially and critically like really poorly. So he had gone from this
Not what
like,
I thought you were going to say there.
oh no. But he had gone from like building up this level of, he had sold 250,000 albums with I forgot what the name of the album before it. So he was kind of like on this increase and then put out like a real bomb of an album. And so he was ready to just retire from DJing and like recording and music altogether.
Mhm.
And so he ended up getting like calls from both Axl Rose and Bono saying that they really liked Animal Rights, this like album that tanked commercially and everything.
That's crazy.
So his plan was he was going to make one more album and then he was going to retire from music altogether. And then he was going to go back to school for architecture. Go figure. And it ended up becoming Play. So
Okay.
the history of the album is once he had like
So it worked out quite well for him.
Yeah. But once he had put the album together, he actually, the first show that he played like to promote Play the album was in the basement of a Virgin Music record store. And he was playing in front of about 40 people who were waiting in a checkout line.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically it was just this like really embarrassing like store show that he was just trying to promote himself. And for like 8 or 9 or 10 months, like basically the album was not getting any play. It was not getting any promotions. So they had started licensing all of the tracks as much as they could. So they're like, let's license them to commercials. Let's license them
all that. Okay.
to film and all this stuff. And there's 18 tracks on the album.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually all 18 tracks had been licensed for some sort of medium, whether it was a commercial, a movie, a music, like.
Well, and I forget what commercial it was, but there was one really, really big one.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it may have been a car commercial, but that commercial put that album on the map.
Was that the? I know Volkswagen had one.
May have been
the big one. But
there was one song in one commercial that I remember put that album on the map.
Yeah, and
like
so
for the general public.
Yeah, and it really gained a lot of attention in the UK, I think, because of more of the. I think they had a bit more of a dance music scene there.
Yeah.
But it was just weird. So he was like ready. He was opening for Bush, and people were just heckling him, all this shit. And then he got a call from his manager that basically said, like, "Hey, man, you just reached #1 in the UK," and that's when things kind of turn around. But it was just, and I liken it. I think about this podcast we're doing right now because he put this thing out and he was super depressed. He was like, this thing was another failure. I just wasted my time, like blah, blah, blah. And then 10 months later, they just kept pushing it and pushing it and pushing it.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, like, it became this, it sold 6,000 copies like the first week it came out. And then after 10 months, it sold like 150,000 copies a week, like on and on.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just like this thing that took off like tremendously, and I think it sold 10 million copies or something. It's platinum.
Great album cover, by the way.
It is, and it's weird because
great album cover.
It sucks because now you get this sort of like retrospective look where people think that it did more damage to the electronic music scene than it did. Whatever. I do not care about that. I think that album cover is immediately recognizable, and with him
I can picture it in my head right now, and I haven't listened or seen that album cover in probably, I don't even know, 15 years, maybe more.
Yeah, but it's the one where he's in the unbuttoned white shirt jumping up.
Exactly. Like I said,
Then there's
vivid in my mind.
Yeah, with that like good green colored wall, and then somebody's holding like a light meter. And it's just like, for some reason, it's just there and it makes sense. But
it's a great album cover, dude.
It is. It's a phenomenal album cover. And I think the stuff he ended up, there was 8 singles from that album that came out, which is a lot. It's basically almost half the album was like single worthy. But like one of the big things that I think he got a little bit of like criticism for was he took samples from this guy Alan Lomax, gave him like a box CD set, and it was from Sounds of the South, which was a lot of, so you'll hear that in like Natural Blues, and the first track was Honey, and you get
I remember that song.
So and you get these sort of Southern, like real old school Southern, they're black singers, and he was sampling them. And some people use that criticism as he like used the African American culture to basically like improve himself. But at the same time, that stuff would have been lost to history. I think it was just something that, I don't know. I don't want to go down that road, because it's just like
I know it's a tough thing to say about cultural appropriation and that type of thing.
Yeah.
But I'm quite certain that upon him recording that album, his thought process was never like, I'm going to use this and make, you know what I mean? Like, it was never vindictive. People sample stuff because, you know what I mean? They hear something and they're like, man, that's awesome. And at this point, like, I mean, we've been having these conversations for a very long time. Like, 80s hip hop is kind of really where sampling started.
Mm-hmm.
And then it got really into it with Dr. Dre and the stuff that he was sampling, especially like on the Chronic. And the Chronic's considered one of the greatest albums of all time.
Yeah.
And, like, these people weren't sampling this stuff in the sense of like, I'm going to steal this and try and make it my own. They're sampling this stuff because the people that made it, whoever you're sampling from, were great musicians and had great producers that created something that was extremely awesome and unique and had such a good vibe in the way that it sounded and was recorded, that like people like Dr. Dre or Moby, whether black or white, heard it and thought, hey, this is something that is awesome and I can use to, whatever, to create this track. That's the way I look at it. That's all I'm saying. It's not,
yes. And I
think
a lot
of sensitivity around it, and I think it's a little over the top at times, but that's just me.
Well, and it's also something that I think would have been lost to obscurity, and it would have just been lost to history, basically. Like this, nobody's going to seek out like real old vintage like footage of, I shouldn't say nobody, but what he did was he took that and he brought it to a medium that then millions of people were like, oh, like I would have never heard of Bessie Jones. I would have never heard of Vera Hall. I would have never heard of, Willie Jones. Now I know of them because of this album. Like, so there's like an importance to that. Granted, they probably, they might be long dead. I don't know how old that footage was. But either way, kind of stepping off of that, he used it, and there's so many samples, and there's such a flow to that album, and each track is its own. Like no track is kind of the same, and there's elements of ambience, there's elements of dance, there's elements of like hip hop. Body Rock is obviously, I think that's still one of my favorite like Wake Up and Go songs.
Very good song.
And it was actually like one of the first hip hop tapes he had ever like heard that he like basically used in that sample, I think. But he created a lot of different, like a lot of music videos were generated, really cool music videos. There's a really cool track by track breakdown that he has on the Rolling Stones 10-year anniversary. If you're interested, you can go read about it, where he talks about basically he didn't really like a lot of the popular songs, I think. And the latter half of the album, the concept behind Play was that it starts off where like you're high energy, you're playing, and then the end of it is kind of like the come down of it all, where like you're running out of energy and it's more of the ambient, more of the down tempo stuff. So it kind of hits that peak around the middle point, and then comes back down. But it was a really cool album. I've never really given Moby a ton of attention, but yeah, I think it was great. I think the only downside I would say is that some of the samples get really repetitive.
I think that happens sometimes in like house, because it does. I feel like that album does have some house elements to it. Am I crazy in thinking that?
Yeah, but I think it's different when you hear a lyrical beat as opposed to just like a musical beat. Like in Honey, the first track, I can't remember what the actual lyric is, but they repeat the same line for like 3 minutes straight. And it just like I should remember it because it should be drilled into my head. But there's parts where it kind of just, it loses its luster after like a minute and a half or 2 minutes. And you're kind of like, oh, is this going anywhere else? But no, there's a lot of cool things. I would say check out that track by track on the Rolling Stone website if you can, if you're interested in it. But
well, and like that's the only knowledge of Moby I have is getting like hearing that album from my brother, and listening to it, and I remember it was very different from anything I was listening to at the time, and it was also like some of those tracks were extremely enjoyable. Like I liked them a lot. Not everything on the album was like for me. And now I think if I went back and listened to it, it would definitely be a different story, for me personally.
Yeah.
But I definitely remember hearing some of those songs and being like, wow, I really like this, even though I never thought it might be something that I like.
And there's a lot of variation on the album. And there's
for sure
minimal lyrics, but the one thing I did notice was that South Side, and you would know it if you heard it. I'm not going to sing it, but it's a very like sort of poppier song. But I didn't realize that the lyrics were about like this gang of kids going to do like a drive-by shooting. But it's the one. It's like, here we are now. I'm not gonna sing it.
You said you weren't gonna sing it.
I know
you couldn't help yourself. Moby's deep inside you.
Yeah, you would know it if you heard it. But yeah, I thought that was interesting because it's kind of like that sort of semi-charmed life where you don't realize that it's like a
super dark, twisted song
with like an upbeat sort of musical thing. But it's literally
opposing lyrics versus melody.
Yeah, it's about this like group of kids basically driving to like the other side of town to do like a drive-by or something.
All right, so
you're something old.
Well, we're like an hour 20 deep, so my something old is going to be super quick. This actually happened like a while back, like several months ago, but I was looking through some of my history here, and I'll just say this right now: London Calling by The Clash. The Clash is something that I got into as a punk fan. I started to kind of dive into a little bit more when I was 17, 18, 19, 20. London Calling, the double album by The Clash, if you've never listened to it and you're any remotely a punk music fan, I thoroughly encourage you all to go listen to it. It's not even that punk and that heavy, but the songwriting, the music, it's absolutely fantastic. It's so good. I can't stress that enough. Go listen to this album if you've never listened to it. There are so many good songs on this album, and you just hear the songwriting capability of this band. It's ridiculous. Just go listen to it. That's my Something Old, The Clash, London Calling. I love it. I
What's your
absolutely
favorite?
love this. It's so good.
What's your favorite track on it?
Well, London Calling is awesome. It's the first track on the album. But Train in Vain is probably my favorite track on the album, which most people have heard and probably don't realize, like, that it's from that album, but
Yeah.
it is. And oddly enough, Train in Vain is the last track on the album. Uh, but the whole album is great. Go listen to it. It's fantastic. My honorable mention this week, I told you I was going to have a hip hop album. So I was looking up some hip hop stuff earlier this week. I found this artist named Rucci, Rucci. He has an album that I believe is called, it's called
Christina Rucci?
No. Good guess though. Where did it go? It's called Tako's Son, Takosson, I believe is the name of the album. And it reminded me a lot, so it's not very heavily like trap. He's from Inglewood, California. It reminded me a lot of almost kind of, you remember Juvenile, the rapper? It kind of had that vibe. Like, if you want to get buck wild, put on some Rucci.
Okay.
But I did like it. Like, there were some songs in there that I really, really liked. I played some of it for my cousin, and he was like, kind of reminds me of Too Short. And my cousin's like more of a hip hop fan and rap fan than I am. And so he played me some like Too Short songs to compare it to, and I could totally see the comparison. But yeah, Rucci, I believe it's called Tako's Son, is the name of the album. And I would say if you're looking for something hip hop wise, go check that out. And it came out in 2019, so it's very, very new. But I found it on some album list, and I was like, all right, I'm going for it. But right away, like I said, the lyrics, it's not very mumble rap, and the beats, the whole album were not very trap heavy. So it appealed to me more than some of the other stuff I've heard recently.
Cool.
What do you got for me?
So mine's something different, and I won't really talk too much because I don't want to promote other people's podcasts. But I did listen to. Have you ever? I know I've told you about it, but the podcast.
Cross promotion is a thing, Steve. It's okay.
Oh, okay. The podcast Song Exploder.
No, I have no idea what the hell that is.
Oh, I thought I told you about it, but basically it is a podcast, and I'm pronouncing the name probably terribly, but Hrishikesh Hirway created it. And basically the idea behind the podcast is they take artists and they take one of their songs and they break down each song like to like the instrumental level. Like,
I do remember you telling me about this.
Yeah, and so
I apologize.
So there's this band that I've been interested in ever since I saw them on the Interlaken Festival like a few weeks back, that live stream, called Khruangbin, and they are a psychedelic band from Texas.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah,
I've seen. Yes, you're not wrong.
Yeah,
and they rule.
So
very awesome band.
Yeah, so I only saw their live set, but I saw that they were on Song Exploder, so I wanted to kind of go listen to that. But I won't go too much into the actual episode itself, but Song Exploder is a podcast that breaks down, it is exactly what the title of the podcast is. It breaks down songs into digestible little elements, so you kind of really hear the individual details that go into each particular song.
And the composition of the song itself.
And the composition, the history, what drove certain decisions. But you hear little things that like they're just nuanced parts of a song that you would not have picked out maybe necessarily with your ear when listening to it. Mm-hmm. But there's certain things. There's a Tako song that he basically Tycho has an episode where he talks about like a thing where he screwed up during the recording but left it in. Mm-hmm. And now you kind of hear that every single time. But it's really interesting. If you like song composition, you like to hear how songs are built. It is really cool. You get insight from the bands. It's called Song Exploder. It's a podcast, and we are not trying to. If you've heard of our podcast, you've probably heard of that one.
Obviously, so who gives a shit? Not to
Yeah.
mention Khruangbin, or however you pronounce their name, also did a set at Lock-In. Trey joined them on stage.
Yes, that was the same one I watched, and I
Yes.
was totally infatuated by their set. I thought it was fantastic.
It's a very cool set. I think their stuff is at times exceptionally simplistic.
Yeah.
Which also makes it very approachable and interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the tones and style that they kind of record and play in make them what they are, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to sound like an asshole by saying what I just said in any way. I do really enjoy them, but I also think there's some, I think some of their stuff is super simple, but they're also great musicians, and they know kind of where they're going and what they're doing at all times. So did you have anything else? I mean, we're obviously going crazy here as usual.
My only two other things I do want to talk about, the Nine Inch Nails Woodstock 94. It is 26.
Why didn't you just lead with this? We could have just done the whole episode
on it. It's 26 years to the day. Nine Inch Nails is being unveiled at the Hall of Fame, the Music Hall of Fame, Rock and Roll Music Hall of Fame.
It's where our picture's from.
It is. That is famous.
We never went inside.
Yeah, we didn't. It was 2 a.m. But that Woodstock 94 set is, if you haven't watched it, and
I never have, so I will.
In terms of old school Nine Inch Nails, like the big spooky scary Nine Inch Nails, like they had a mud fight before the set.
Yeah.
Like, and they basically, Trent has admitted, like, they did it simply because they needed the money. It was right after Downward Spiral came out. They didn't, like, they were popular, like they had MTV Airplay and stuff. Mm-hmm. But because Woodstock 94 was a pay-per-view event, mm-hmm. they showed up, and it was like a primetime slot kind of thing.
Oh yeah, I remember watching it in 1994. I watched it with my brothers. We had we had a black, not the Nine Inch Nails set.
Okay.
Specifically, but we had
a black box to get.
We had a black box. We had a legal cable. For our younger listeners, that was the thing back then. But I remember so vividly watching the Maniac Mud Fight, which is what it was labeled as.
Yeah. From
the audience to Green Day's playing their set. Green Day playing their set at Woodstock. And it was, as a very, very young, impressionable viewer, I thought it was the coolest shit ever, especially as somebody that would become a gigantic punk rock fan and, you know, punk rock guitar player in some sort of sense, in terms of like the style that I play in and what I like to play. But watching that Woodstock set was, as a very young individual, I remember it extremely specifically, in our basement of the townhouse that we lived in, and it was awesome. So I'm excited to check out the Nine Inch Nails set from that. And I sent it to you today. I don't know if you knew that it got posted. I'm sure you probably did. You probably get every Nine Inch Nails notification on the planet. But
well, because I saw they posted that picture that they were unveiling the Nine Inch Nails exhibit at the Hall of Fame. And it was a direct, it was about that performance in particular, which did kind of get them to a like a bigger audience, because they were caked in mud. They were sliding and fighting all over the stage. It's just a really, like, if you just like that grungy, like down and dirty, like industrial sound, it's an awesome set. It's on YouTube. Just search Nine Inch Nails 94 Woodstock and you'll find it. The other thing I do want to talk about, because I actually really did enjoy it, Marky had suggested our old friend Mark Castelny suggested a
What's
band
up,
called,
Marky? I've known Marky since I was like 4 years old.
yeah, I get my hair cut from him, but I don't have to do that anymore. The and congrats on the new gig. But he suggested a band called Good Kid, and I really it was super fun, and I really enjoyed it. It was probably they're kind of like this group. I think they're from Canada as well, which is apparently where all good music comes from nowadays. But they're like a group of, they're programmers. They make video games. They research AI. They all work for like tech companies, I guess. But they're easy to compare to a bunch of different like indie rock bands. I kept thinking of like the Wombats, there's like a little bit of Brendan Urie from Panic at the Disco in the guy's voice, I think. But it's very dancey, it's very fun, it's very do-it-yourself. They make a lot of artwork. There's a really fun music video for their new single called Everything Everything, where they were going to make a music video, but because of the pandemic, they did it via Zoom.
Okay.
So it's like, I just thought it was funny. But I listened to their EP. I think it was their self-titled, but the tracks I really liked on there were Tell Me You Know and Alchemist. And for Marky, if you're listening, there's a band called Johnny Foreigner from the UK, and they have a song called Salt, Peppa, and Spinderella. And this kept making me think of that song. It was from like 10 years ago. But I think if you like this band, you will like that song. So I suggest you go listen to that song because it's just fun. It's kind of in that same vein. But I really appreciate it. I will be listening to these guys and checking out more for whatever they put out in the future. So
and it is Good Kid, correct?
Good Kid.
Right on.
So as long as it's
thank you, Marky.
Yeah. And it was good to hear from him. It made me happy.
Absolutely.
Miss that guy. So yeah, I mean that's kind of all I got right now because we again way over,
dude. It's so hard. And we really appreciate everybody that is listening and checking shit out. We get into this stuff and it's fun and it's so hard to keep it short.
It is.
Because I don't know, maybe we just need to have less segments, Steve. I don't know. I don't know what to do.
This is fine.
So another hour 34, and
we'll talk less about Moby next time.
And, we'll figure it out. It'll hopefully get better and better as time goes on.
Perfect. I need homework. Do you have homework for me?
Not right now, dude. No, it's an hour 35. I'll give you homework via text message. Get out of here with the homework bullshit.
All right. I'll send it to you later.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We really appreciate it. It's episode 7. If you've been keeping up with us, if you have suggestions, leave it on our YouTube channel.
Wait. We have to do the name draw for $20.
No, we don't have to do it. We can do it later. We can do it on another Instagram video.
We said we'd do it.
Okay, then do it.
All right. Doing it. I'm doing the raffle. I'm doing the random name generator online, and it was Nick Compton.
Oh, what's up, Nick Compton?
So,
ultimate frisbee extraordinaire.
So reach out.
Improviser extraordinaire.
Okay, so we will reach out to us with the password hammer throw to either me or Sean or whatever. And you will find out if you won the $20 this week.
But you did, Nick. So
you
enjoy
did.
Your $20. Yeah, enjoy your $20 and your Chipotle or whatever you decide to buy with it. But to anybody that's following along, we appreciate it. We're having a lot of fun. I know we've had downloads from Australia and kind of all over the place, and that's the coolest thing we could ever imagine. We've only been doing this for about 7 weeks, and it's really cool that people are that interested in our interest in music. So thanks everybody for listening, and we will be back next week with another episode 8, and God only knows how long it will be.
2 hours.
No, it will not be 2 hours. All right, I will never let it get to longer than 1 hour and 40 minutes because I'll literally just throw my computer against the wall. But have a great weekend, everybody. Be safe. Don't catch COVID. Wear a mask. Do all those things. Wash your hands. And we will talk to you next week. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Bye.